Good evening, everyone. I have to take my glasses off so that I can see a little bit here as I look out at the room. But I'm real grateful and pleased that we have you here, our parents and our students, as we wish to spend a little bit of time reviewing the results of our MEAP test to find out a little bit more information about MEAP, to look at academic achievement as it relates to the MEAP scores and some of the reasons why we are engaged in this whole process. And I'm just pleased to hear and to see that we have parents and who are here wishing to learn more about that. Honestly, I would like to see a little bit more, but we know that this viewing will be shared with the television audience, and even those of us here tonight will be able to go home and on channel 16 see this played again. And so make sure that you share this with your friends and family and neighbors in the community, that this is a very important conversation, a very important presentation regarding the achievement of our students here in the Southfield Public School District. I'd like to take a special opportunity to introduce and to acknowledge our board members that are present this evening, and we're always very grateful. We always say we have a dream team here in the district, and so we're grateful for their work and for their input and for their presence. Mrs. Betty Robinson is present today. She is here. Yes. Mr. Nathaniel Lewis is present as a board member. And our Vice President, Mr. Rance Williams, present. Not a big introduction on my part. We work very hard as educators, attempting to support the learning and provide the experiences for our teachers to have with our children. And I want everyone to just be reminded that this MEAP assessment is simply one snapshot and one day during one period of the year that our children are assessed. And we could spend a whole evening on assessments, and one day we'll do more of that. But this is just about the MEAP assessment tonight. And when we get back together about student achievement and assessments, you'll also learn more about the MEAP test, which actually is given 3 times throughout the course of the year. You'll learn more about the ACT Explorer, etc. But tonight will be about MEAP. And the person that we all adore and are appreciative for the work that he does, he retired and then came back out of retirement because of his love for this and his excellence toward providing a picture and a data analysis for representing the work of our children, is Mr. Earl Dixon. And many know Mr. Dixon because he was a principal here in a district, and he also now is our assessment consultant. So I'm very grateful for Mr. Dixon, and would you come to the podium and share with our parents about our MEAP exam.
Thank you, Dr. Wood, and good evening again to all parents that are here, and for those that will watch at a later time. If this was a concert, I know you would be up in the front row. So I'm not going to call on you. Also, if you went to a comedy show, you do not sit in the front because they make you a part of the concert that evening. So this is going to be informational, about 61 slides that you'll be able to review at a later time. Once the documentation and the slides become truly official, that's when the accountability scorecard will be available to you in July of 2013. This information will be what I would call bona fide. The mysschooldata.org site for any parent or guardian. If you write mysschooldata.org. So any data you want on any school in the state of Michigan, if you go to mysschooldata.org, that's mysschooldata.org site, and you can research any school in Southfield or in the state. In the past, you needed access codes and a particular website to go to get that information, but now it's readily available as part of our transparency in the state of Michigan. Tonight's sequence. Just going to go overview for those that are that have been as part of a MEAP presentation before, and introduction for others. So it's an overview for some of you and introduction to others. We're going to look at an achievement gap video. We'll take certain clips of that to show how that weaves into our scores here in Southfield. We'll take a look at the 2 slides from Oakland County. Dr. Bauer conducted a study to look at the scores in districts and how it relates to economically disadvantaged. We're going to look at our MEAP scores to see if they went up or did they go down. And finally, we're going to look at the African American results in Southfield compared to others across the state and within the county. And before I forget, let me say we have subgroups. A subgroup would be male, that's a part of a whole group. It could be female, which is part of a whole group. It could be ethnicity, economic disadvantage, special ed. Now our subgroup is our major group. Let me say it again. Our subgroup, African American, is 96 to 97% of our student body. And you will see a slide later on to show that capacity, that percentage in other districts. I should say finally we'll look at monitoring student data to enhance student achievement. And you talked about MEAP, just have 2 slides on MEAP. This is a MEAP presentation, but we have to talk about MEAP and how we're monitoring student data. Student scores are influenced by 3 things: what students learn in school, what students learn outside of school, and the student's innate intelligence. Now that first one is what students learn in school. Most times you think that it's the academic learning that students come home with. I know my 26-year-old, my 28-year-old, they attended nursery school at age 3 and 4. And so when they left home every morning, before going to school, when we go to a child care person, they would say, "Goodbye, Daddy." And they would come home and say, "Hi, Daddy." And then when we went to preschool, they would come home and say, "What's up?" I was paying $150 a week. But they also learn academic, and they also learn cultural things from others. So I just want you to be aware of that. And what students learn outside of school, that means at home and at your relatives' homes and their friends' homes. So they learn from others as well. Now, when I was younger, young folk loved to sit around and hear the conversations of older people. And we learned quite a bit by doing that. Younger students sit in their bedrooms or downstairs somewhere or in the front room on their iPads, iPods, computers, laptops, and they learn from others other than their family. So what they learned outside of school, we can control that, but not the schools cannot control that, but the parents and guardians can. I made a promise to my children that I was not going to allow them to have their children be taught by others. We're going to control that in our home. So as a grandparent, we can assist the learning of our grandchildren. So we're going to couple our learning with the school's teaching and our teachings, and hopefully my grandchildren will come out better than their parents. Not that my children have a problem, but they didn't have grandparents to help me. Okay, but I'll be a grandparent to help them. And also the students' innate intelligence. And we all know if you have more than one child, that there's a difference in the intelligence level of children. Sometimes it's close, sometimes it's not too close. So 3 things influence student scores in schools. What we can control is what students learn in school. I saw something that happened 2 days ago. I won't mention what happened, but every time something happens to a young person now, it's the school they attended or the school district. You don't hear about the parents. You know, it can happen after school, on the weekend, over the summer, but now it seems as though schools are blamed for what happens to young people. Where are the parents? Where are the guardians? Where are the relatives? Now, the MEAP measures, and we'll put everyone on a scale from 1 to 99th percentile. So if a school scores in the bottom quartile, you become a focus school, or I should say a priority school. But what we should be measuring is the growth by child. So the MEAP does that for us, and we'll talk about that at another meeting, but the MEAP measures where a student is at the time of enrollment or beginning of the school year, and then they measure it 3 times per year, beginning, middle, and end. So we can gauge how much learning took place from September through June. But the MEAP, as you said earlier, is only a one-time score and does not truly measure what teachers are doing in classrooms. For our review, we know that the MEAP has 4 performance levels. 4 performance levels at the bottom. Level 1 is advanced, level 2 is proficient, level 3 is partially proficient, and level 4 is not proficient. When determining your accountability scorecard, formerly known as AYP, Adequate Yearly Progress, the state and the federal government will determine who are advanced and which students are proficient. So we add those 2 levels together, levels 1 and 2. When you add those 2 levels together, that determines if a school is making adequate yearly progress, as in the past, but now it's a new accountability scorecard. We don't have time to go into that tonight. But the accountability scorecard will look at levels 1 and 2 to determine the number of students proficient, to determine if we're on track, and if students are on track to be college and career ready. So grades 3 through 8 are measured, evaluated in reading, math, and then grade 7 and grade 4 for writing, grades 5 and 8 science, and grades 6 and 9 social studies. So the score follows a student of their last school year enrollment. So for instance, if I'm a 5th grader and I move to another city in the state of Michigan and take the MEAP, my score follows me from my 5th grade year, because what you learn during your 5th grade year, and you take your assessment, the MEAP in 6th grade, the score is attributed back to your 5th grade school. We had new cut scores to be in place in spring of 2011, and for the fall assessment and the fall 2012 assessment, the MEAP, we had new cut scores. So if you look at reading, and let's look at 2010, the old cut score was 300. And the new cut score, 324. The old cut score, 300, new cut score, 324. That's 24 points a gain in regards to needing to be proficient. You needed to have 324 versus 300. In the 4th grade reading, from 400 to 419, 5th grade, 500 to 521, and so on. So they increased the cut scores. And what happened with that is that more students were not proficient because they increased the cut score. And we look at that again very shortly. In math, they moved from 300 to 336. Now reading, 300 to what? 324. Math, 300 to 336. So math had a higher cut score than reading. So what do you think happened to the math scores versus the reading scores? Reading scores were lower, but which ones were lower than reading? Math, because he had a higher cut score, 336. Science moved from 500 to 553. And that's a greater gain than math even. That's 53-point difference. 8th grade science moved 45 points. So reading scores moved down a little, math scores moved down a little bit more, science scores moved down even more. Now this slide tells you what percent of students need to be proficient for a district to make adequate yearly progress as used in the past, and now using the accountability scorecard, what percent of students need to be proficient to show that the district is moving forward in having students college and career ready. So we look at math for the elementary level, 40%. Middle school, 36%, and high school, 30%. Now this was posted July 2012. We took the assessment, the MEAP, in October. This has already changed. And it changed 2 times prior to this. So the cut scores and the percent needing to be proficient changed 3 times in 1 school year. The final analysis is this example. Using the school's last year's proficiency rate. So the school last year was 65% proficient in reading. Let's use 3rd grade reading for example. 65% of the schools, of the students that took their MEAP, if they were proficient, 65%, we have to determine this year's proficiency rate. So by 2021, 2022 school year, 85% of all students must be proficient. So what's happening is that if we current year, from last school year, with 65% were proficient, you had to have 85% proficient by the year 2021, 2022 school year. Then you take this mathematical formula and say 85% is where you need to be. You're currently achieving at 65%. You divide that by the number of years to get to 2021, 22. That equals 2. So this year's 2012, 2013 proficiency rate for a particular school, 3rd grade reading in this case, this year 67% of the students will have to be proficient. Are you there? So this year, 67% of the students have to be proficient for a school to get a green on the new accountability scorecard. And that's a dark green. Last year, it just made AYP. This year, you have different levels of AYP according to the accountability scorecard. Dark green, lime green, yellow, red, and also orange. I'm going to go past 2 slides to say that full academic year. Now, if you have 100 students in your building, 80 of those students were in the building for 2 count periods and the end of the year collection, what you call the rollover time. So 2 count periods. So last year, they had to be in the building for the September count, for the February count, and for the end of the year count for a student to be considered full academic year. So the state uses full academic year to determine proficiency. So if you have 100 students in 3rd grade reading, 80 were in your building for 2 count periods and the end of the year collection, those students are counted for proficiency. The other 20 are not. Now what you see in the Oakland Press and other media, you'll see all students counted. You see all 100 students counted in their scores. But what the state uses is the full academic year student body and not all students. This is how to determine if a school or a district are moving students along in regards to having them college and career ready. We do not use all students. Only the full academic year students are used. And the last bullet down here says that this ensures that only students that have been educated by the school district count for proficiency. But what you see in the newspaper, again, you see all students, not FAY students. So there's a discrepancy there. And we look at a slide to show you how that affects schools. I'm using the high school because the high school only has 1 grade level. At the middle school and elementary levels, they combine all grade levels in the building to determine FAY, so it's a little more difficult to explain. So I'll just use the high school to show you how that affects the number of students that are proficient. At Southfield High School, they had 233 students that took the MME, 194 were FAY. That means 16.7% of the students that took the MME in 2012 in the spring were new to the district. But the scores they report in the newspaper, they report all students, not the 194. They report all students. Southfield Lathrop, 219 students took the assessment, 197 were in the building for a full year. SRAC, 100 students took the assessment, only 42 students were in the building for a full year. And at the University High School Academy, only one student was not there for the full year. Let's look at how the scores reflect that. In the newspaper, you'll see this amount right here, this number right here. You'll see 29% of the students at one of our high schools were proficient. 29% were proficient on the MME. That means they were level 1 or level 2. That's why you didn't sit in the front. But levels 1 and levels 2, that's that number, 29%. But when we remove those students that were not in the district for more than 1 year, and only count the students that were full academic year, 68% proficient. 68% proficient. That's 39 points difference. Is that significant? Now, which score would you rather see if you're looking for a credit score? Would you rather see your 29? Or would you rather see the 68, which one? So we already know the answer to that one. If they were using the 29 for your combined history of your TRW versus your current one. Because sometimes you had an up and down period. I don't know about you, I know I did. So, but if they use the 68% for accountability purposes, this is what you should see in the newspaper. But we do not. We see all students, not FAY. But all students is not used by the state to determine adequate yearly progress or which color you get on the accountability scorecard. Another high school, 39% proficient, all students, 75% FAY, 36-point difference. Another high school, 77%, all students, and when they removed those that had not been in the building for a full year, 95% were proficient, almost perfect. 18-point difference. I have 3 slides to show you the number of years in Southfield and the resulting score. I just used 3rd grade math. Students that were in the district for 1 year, 29% of them were proficient. If it's been in the district for 2 years or more, 28%. 3 years or more, 39%. Now this is 3rd grade reading, so you only could be in the district for 3 years, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, or kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. So, but there is a difference, a 10-point difference between the 1st year and the 3rd year. 4th grade math, difference of 17 points between the 1st year being in the district versus being in the district for 3 years or more. So we can say, by looking at this data, that the longer you are in Southfield, the higher your MEAP score. 5th grade reading, a 12-point difference between 1st and 3+ years, and a 2-point difference between 2 years and 3+ years. We're going to take a look at a achievement gap video, different sections of it, before we look at other data.
Think forward. Think Research Channel.
There's a structural problem with genocide, which is that it tends to happen in places that are off the beaten path.
So now, in order to promote nonviolence and reduce violence, ultimately we have to address the motivation.
Society needs to acknowledge that learning is a lifelong challenge.
The sit-ins challenge cherished beliefs most whites held dearly.
At the DNA level, we're all 99.9% the same. All of us.
So individuals do matter. And I think the quality of our individual leadership matters.
Who is speaking for poor people? 40 million Americans make $6 an hour. Who is speaking for them?
The only thing that one has after throwing everything overboard is the love that one can give.
My perspectives on America's educational system, particularly on the black-white test score gap, changed dramatically on August 29, 2005. This was the day that Hurricane Katrina devastated Louisiana and other parts of the Gulf Coast. Before I witnessed the horrors of this event, I had always considered myself to be a very progressive teacher, educator, activist, and researcher committed to the reformation of schools in order to provide equal educational opportunities for all students, but particularly low-income and African-American students. However, as I watched the national response to this disaster grow more shameful each day, I was further convinced that the reformation of schools was not enough. What I came to know is that if African American students are to succeed in schools, both schools and society have to be dramatically transformed, not merely reformed. Why did the worst natural disaster recorded in U.S. history change how I think about schools and African American school achievement? Well, unlike other natural disasters of the past, Katrina came ashore and uncovered what many Americans preferred not to see: poverty, racism, classism, arrogance of power, and decades of neglect. Although the damage and destruction of this hurricane cut across racial and economic lines, FEMA data and satellite maps confirmed that poor African American residents of New Orleans and their children were disproportionately displaced and suffered the greatest loss. Hence, Hurricane Katrina is a symbol of what can happen when a nation systematically and unabashedly abandons the most vulnerable. What do we know about the test score gap? The test score gap refers to the difference between the scores of African American and Hispanic students as compared to their white and Asian counterparts. This test score gap is revealed by the fact that white students on the average will score 20 to 30 points higher than their African American and Hispanic peers. 17-year-old African American students, by the way, have skills in reading, math, and science that are similar to those of a 13-year-old white student. The so-called new revised SAT has produced the same old score gaps. Black test takers, 93 points lower than whites in critical reading, 107 points lower in math, 91 points lower in writing. Interesting, the test score gap exists even when researchers control for social class. In other words, when middle and upper middle income African American students are compared to their social class counterparts, the gap persists. We know that low school achievement and dropping out of school have major implications for the economic survivability of this nation. The estimated economic cost of low achievement: well, a high school dropout earns $260,000 less over a lifetime than a high school graduate. What can schools do? First, we need more competent and caring teachers. Although psychological, economic, and sociological perspectives do explain the underachievement of African American students. Convincing data show that recruiting, training, and retaining quality teachers for low-income students of color are significant and likely solutions to the problem. We know both instinctively and empirically that, quote, what matters most, quote, are competent, highly qualified, caring teachers in our nation's classrooms. Most educators, researchers, and the general public agree that the quality of a student's teacher is the single most important variable in closing the achievement gap. Addressing the teacher quality factor in low-performing schools is even more critical. A report on public school students' access to well-qualified teachers concluded, quote, if states hope to close the achievement gap between minority and non-minority students and those from rich and poor families, they must first close the gap in access to skilled teachers. Teachers have to revise how they teach. Specifically, they need to acquire culturally responsive pedagogical skills. These are skills that require teachers to understand that students' learning is influenced by their social and cultural experiences. And in order to maximize student achievement, teachers must gain knowledge of the history and cultures represented in their classrooms and infuse this knowledge into everyday instructional practices. Schools cannot close the achievement gap simply by concentrating on school variables. Parents need assistance and support in helping their children. High student mobility needs to be decreased and affordable housing increased. Pregnant women need high quality prenatal care. Children need regular pediatric care. No child should ever come to school or leave school hungry. Starting at infancy, children should be exposed to books. We desperately need more summer, after school, and parenting program. And lastly, the number of single-parent homes in this country must be decreased. We cannot close the achievement gap if we cannot close these other gaps. We have to close the teacher quality gap, the challenging curriculum gap, the school funding gap. We have to close the digital divide gap, the wealth and income gap, parenting skills gap, employment opportunity gap. We have to close the affordable housing gap, healthcare gap, nutrition gap, integration gap, and quality child care gap. We must act, not by saving one African American child at a time, but by working on the institutionalization of structures and policies that protect, educate, and nurture all children.
Someone talked about the DNA of all of us, 99.9%, we're all the same. And that schools and society must transform, not just reform. And that the achievement gap shows that there are 20 to 30 points difference in the scores of white compared to African Americans. And looking at the SAT, 93 points difference in reading. Math, 107 points difference, and writing, 91. They said that schools need to have competent and caring teachers. We have that in Southfield. And you'll see some slides later to show that the gap is not that great, 20 to 30 points, when you look at Southfield compared to other districts, the way that Dr. Irvine just explained. Also, that teachers need to have a thorough and deep understanding of their content. We have those teachers. They also talked about the social and cultural experiences. We need to take our children, children in Southfield, especially those of African American descent, Hispanic and others. They need to show them the world, take them on trips, and show them different parts of the U.S. and other countries. We also have to close the achievement gap by taking care of the other gaps. She talked about the nutrition gap, the housing gap, the mobility gap, the teacher quality gap, the challenging curriculum gap, the digital divide, wealth and income, and other gaps must be closed before we can close the achievement gap. Hunger. If you're hungry or tired, can you learn? If you have an emotional, I should say, an emotional, the emotional well-being of a child has a lot to do with his or her ability to learn. So home environment, school environment, there are a lot of gaps we have to close in order to close the achievement gap. The schools can work on some, but we need community, the state, the federal government, and others to help us in the other areas. Now, the two slides we talked about, Ernie Bauer, Dr. Bauer at Oakland Schools create these slides. And he determined that if you look at the score, if you look at the score here, a high score, this particular school district, which is, can you see that there? Which school district is that? Bloomfield Hills. And they're near the 90% proficiency marks, it's around 87 or so. But their economic disadvantage is below 10%. So what is this showing us? It's showing us that the higher, over here, the higher the economically disadvantaged student population, the lower the score. Now, we're not giving you this data to show this as an excuse why scores are lower in districts on this end of town, or this end of the county. This is factual. This is data. Also, the video we just watched regarding the achievement gap points this out. So if you look at the higher the score, the lower the economically disadvantaged student population. The higher the economic disadvantage, the lower the score. And this is what this is reading. Let's look at writing. Same thing happens. If you look at all subjects, it's going to be the same. The higher the economic disadvantage student population, the lower the score. So you couple that with African American enrollment, well, say, add three things together: special ed enrollment, economically disadvantaged, African American enrollment. The scores tend to be lower in the county and across the state. Southfield. We test at the 6th grade level in reading, 96% of our students were African American, or are African American. If you look at 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, that number is going to be between 95.8 to 98%. So this is a subgroup. Sub means not all, but this is just about all. So when you compare our all students with the districts, with other districts, they only represented 12.2% Birmingham, 6th grade reading, and these scores are about the same when you go to 4th and 5th, as well as 7th and 8th. So about 12% of the students are African American in Birmingham, Berkeley 16.3, across the state 17.8%, 19.7 in Oakland County, 25.7 for Clarenceville, 26.5 for Farmington, Hazel Park, and Ferndale. So we looked to the south, we looked to the west, we looked to the north, and we looked to the east, and just selected some schools to give you a comparison of those schools in the area and their enrollment in regards to African American, economically disadvantaged, and special ed. So there's only one other school district higher than our 62.3% economic disadvantage, and there's no one higher than our 96%. And we're third of all these listings in special ed enrollment. Our scores. Social studies, we lost 1 point in 6th grade, and we lost 1 point in 9th grade. At the county level, in 9th grade, the scores were the same for 2011, 2012. This is comparing 2011 and 2012. I should have put that on the slide, that we lost 1 point in 6th grade, and we lost 1 point in 9th grade. Comparing 2011, 2012, a 2-year study, This is just showing you the same thing. This is showing you on the chart the 1 point loss. Science, in 5th grade, we gained 3 points, and we lost 3 points in 8th grade. And that's about the same across the county. The county lost 2 points in 8th grade, and the state lost 4 points in 8th grade. We lost 3 points. 3-point loss. But we gained in 5th grade. Writing proficiency, gained in 4th as well as 7th. Point gain in writing, and a 12-point gain in writing in 7th grade. How does that look in a chart? That's the 7th grade writing. That's the same 12-point gain there. They could give you a different view to show you we had 12-point gain when compared to 2011 and 2012. Our reading scores, all but 4th grade, we experienced an increase. 13 points in 3rd grade, and you can see it there. A 5-point loss in 4th grade, 2-point gain in 5th grade. We remain the same in 6th grade, 9-point gain in 7th grade, 1-point gain in 8th grade. We also lost in 4th grade math, and you'll see that shortly. Let's just show you another view of 3rd grade reading to show you the 13-point gain, as you see here. Just showing you another view of that 13-point gain. 9-point gain in reading, 7th grade. Math, as I said, we lost 2 points in math, 4th grade. So other than when you look at 3rd grade through 8th grade, reading and math, other than 4th grade, we had gains at all grade levels. And that's even with the new cut scores being in place. Scores would have been much higher if it had not been for the cut scores changing on us. As again, I said our largest group for MME and MEAP is the African American. How are our scores compared to others? What I did, I just removed those names of the school districts in the county. So I just ranked order Southfield and schools in the county, looking south, west, north, and east. And these are the schools of some school districts in the surrounding area. And SPS in 3rd grade reading, we're above the state and the county when you compare the African American subgroup. So when you're comparing that 96% of our students are what? Birmingham was about 12.2, and the others were just slightly higher. So we're above the county and above the state in 3rd grade reading. 4th grade reading, we're above the county and above the state. There were 4 districts just above us, not by much, only that one district at the end, that's 75.7. And also, there were 75 there as well. Only 2 districts were higher than our 3rd grade reading group. You're looking at African American subgroup. And for 5th grade reading, we're above the county and above the state again. The average, the mean score for African Americans at the county level and the state level. 3rd grade math, 2 school districts placed above us, but we're above the county and above the state. 4th grade math, we're above the county and above the state. 3 school districts outpaced us. You look at the African American subgroup. 5th grade math, above the county and above the state. So again, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade reading and math, we're above the county and above the state average for which subgroup? African American. Now this is just another chart to show the average score in Southfield with the average score in other counties. So we took all the schools in other counties and came up with a mean score and compared that to Southfield's actual score for our students. Now these are several schools in other counties and just one school district for Southfield. 3rd grade reading matched up with all those counties. Now you know that Oakland County and Washtenaw County have in the top 10 in regards to the highest scores in the state. So the County of Washtenaw and Oakland County have the highest scores in the top 10, sometimes top 5, depending on which grade level, in the state. So if Southfield is outpacing Oakland and Washtenaw County at the 3rd grade reading level, that means we're doing an okay job, or good job, or great job. Great job. So our average in Southfield, 64.7% of our students were proficient. And if you compare that to the 57.1 for Oakland schools and 50% for Washtenaw County. That's Ann Arbor, Belleville, and those school districts. If you look at 3rd grade reading, this is all students comparison, not African American. This is all students comparison. Whites, Hispanic, Asian, all students. Now we're on the low end. We're above the county, we're above Wayne Risa. But look at the scores, 64.7, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Now, compared to this school district, this county, 68.7, they are exactly 4 points ahead of us. Now, how many points was the difference in the video? They said, how many points? 20 to 30 point difference. Looking at these counties, there's only a 4-point gap between all students. Now, this is not the African American population. This is the all students right here. And this is our African American population for Southfield, but it's all students in other counties. Now, when we remove the Asian, white, and other ethnicities from these counties and use the same data, not the same data, but the same schools or same counties, now Southfield has the highest score. So 64.7, same score, but these other scores change. So let's find St. Clair County, 29.1, the African American population, right? 3rd grade reading, St. Clair County, 29.1%. Let's go back and look at their all student scores. St. Clair County, 68.7. So we know it's 29, so to say that's 30, so 68 minus 30, that's a 38-point difference. So that fits that 20 to 30-point gap in the video clip they're talking about. But it doesn't fit in Southfield. That gap is only 4, 3, 2, and 1. Third grade math. Southfield's average for the African American subgroup, 35.3%. Oakland schools, 27.4. Washtenaw County, 21.1. So we're higher than the county, Oakland County, as well as Washtenaw County, and all these other counties as well, Genesee, Macomb, St. Clair, and Wayne Risa. And why did I use 3rd and 6th grade? I used the 1st grade level at the elementary level and 6th grade for the 1st grade level at the middle school level for testing. So I just didn't go in and find the best scores. I said, let me be consistent. I'll just take the 1st grade level for elementary school that was tested, and the 1st grade level at the middle school level, and there's only 1 grade level at the high school level, which is 11th grade. So when we did this presentation before, we used 3rd, 6th, and 11th. But today, we're not dealing with the high school, MME, so we're only looking at MEAP scores, so we use 3rd and 6th grade. So 6th grade reading, 54% proficient African American subgroup, and 55.7 for Oakland schools, and 51.9 for Washtenaw County. So other than Oakland schools, and only by 1.7 was the difference in Southfield being #1 in regards to these counties and 6th grade reading African American subgroup scores. Math, 19% for Southfield, 22.8% for Oakland, Washtenaw County 19.3. So we were above the state, but below the county in 6th grade math. The next 4 slides, or about 4 slides, will show you how close our students were to being proficient. So of the FAY students, no, this is all students, excuse me. I took all student scores and looked at their propensity to the new cut scores, the closeness to the line of being at the cut score mark. So 3rd grade reading. The cut score is 300, the old cut score. The old cut score of 300 was here, so all the students above that would have been proficient, but the new cut score is 324. So see right around that line, right below that line, and that line below that line, so these 2 lines right here are only 1 or 2 questions away from being level 1, from being level 2, excuse me. So all these students, and I counted them, not the circles, and I went back and I think I said at the study session, I counted them by hand. I went back and checked via SPSS and found about 53 students were 1 or 2 questions away from being level 2, which would have made them proficient, which would change our percent proficient by about 14 points. And that's significant. And that's for reading. Now for math, we know that the new cut score is 336. I mean, look at all, it's like 65, 66 students right in this area. 1 or 2 more problems correct, and they would have been level 2. So we're right on the bubble. We're right there for moving our percent proficient by 12 to 15% easily, very easily, in math as well as reading. And what are we doing to ensure that we continue to improve student achievement? We talked about the MEAP. We administered the MEAP at the beginning of the school year. We administered it again in January, and we're going to give it again in May. And we'll know the entry score, their midterm score, and their final score to determine the growth each student had by being in Southfield for 1 school year. And we'll be able to match that against the teacher that delivered the instruction. So again, we measure 3 times a year. The data is immediately available. So when a student completes the assessment, what, 5 minutes? Immediately. That's our MEAP expert over there, Ms. Stasinski. Teachers are being trained to drill down the data, and students are learning how to interpret that data as well. This is a sample progress report, and these will be available at parent-teacher conferences. And they will also take these home, and students will understand this better than parents because they're on the computer all the time. They look at this, they look at charts and data, and they have it in school. I think my last math class was 42 years ago. So unless you're working with math on a daily basis or charts, students will understand this quicker than we will. Because we had a parent that said, well, my child is not going to understand this. I think students will understand this much easier than we think they will. This is a couple of things that we're doing with data review. The Division of Instruction, our data coaches meet with administrative and instructional staff to download, analyze, and chart data. We use data to drive instruction and improve student achievement. On a longitudinal basis, we look at data to look for trends. And Pearson Inform, which is a software, web-based software, which means teachers and administrators can be at home and look at data at their leisure. So we're constantly looking at data to improve instruction and to improve student achievement. So I thank you for your time, because some of you are trying to get home to watch the Heat game. It's either going to be 24 or 25. 24 or 25 straight. 25? They're going for the 25th straight victory. So we open it up now for questions and answers. Well, I should say for questions. And hopefully we'll have your answers. No? Yes, yes.
What's the problem with the talk looking at those data, it's covered the fourth grade. It seems to be the problematic area.
Right. And yeah. But we look at the third grade because this test for fourth grade is based on what they learned last year. So it is a fourth grade scores. So we had to go back and look at the third grade teaching staff to determine. Yeah, the question was that, for the next person we'll use the mic, the question was that, we have a small crowd, so, but the question was, what's wrong with the fourth grade score? So we have to go back and look at third grade and analyze that data to determine what's happening there. And our MEAP test will help with that. So that's the short answer because I have not done that yet. Right.
Are the kids being taught how to take tests versus process of elimination when it comes to testing?
Yes.
It's for the reproduction of it.
Right. That's a very good question. And it's a good question because across the K-8 spectrum and into high school, it is expected that our teachers are providing test-taking skills, and I know that is happening. Part of the challenge with our MEAP assessment is that the MEAP assessment is given after our children have had a full summer in many cases where they have not been engaged in regular schooling. And so when the teachers return and the children return, as the gentleman asked previously, the fourth grade MEAP is really testing what they learned in the previous year. So we have to not only catch up what may have occurred over the summer and revisit for our children because they too need moments and time to revisit learning that they've already had as well as to move forward. So that's part of the challenge that we have and part of the fact that yes, they are taught test-taking skills, but it is a lot going on in the first 4 to 5 weeks of the school year. And our children, as precious as they are trying to adapt to all these new changes. When we start with the new assessment in the future, 2015, we have a brand new assessment that will not be called just the MEAP. It will not be given in the fall. It will be given after our children have been in school for a good 6 months. And that's how the MEAP used to be administered when I started teaching. The MEAP was administered during, later in the second semester to give more insight about what have our children learned in this year of instruction. And as Mr. Dixon mentioned, we started administering a new assessment here in the district called the MEAP because, you know, the MEAP is one assessment, I said earlier, one snapshot. But we're very interested in our children growing and determining what academic growth they are being proficient with and learning that information during the course of the school year. And also, sir, one of the things that your teacher and your child's teacher and building principal will begin providing is information about the skills and the concepts specifically that your child is very proficient with and those that your child is in the process of gaining greater proficiency with. And so with that said, we're working hard to improve what we're doing to support your child as it relates to showing and demonstrating what they're learning, because that's what we're here to do. And Mr. Dixon did a tremendous job of providing a comprehensive view for you about testing. And I will have to say this, it's probably not the best statement to say, but it's true. There's a lot of politics as it relates to this whole agenda about testing and state testing and accountability. And we're here to make sure that our children are proficient and that they're representing and demonstrating what all children should be demonstrating. But there's so much more that sometimes that MEAP test doesn't say about our children and about your child and about the children that I work so hard for every day. And so I thank you, Mr. Dixon, for providing us with a very comprehensive look at the whole testing agenda here in the district and just making sure that what is not reported in those newspapers is so important for us. That's our kids and what we're held accountable for. So it's like a game to some degree. What happens, what we hear in the papers and what's reported in the newspaper, on the television, and really what we need to be promoting and supporting for our children so that they get the efficacy and they believe in themselves enough. I'm going to do even better because I'm on that road to getting better. So I do want to thank you. I also want to acknowledge this evening our board president that is here in the audience, Mr. Darrell Buchanan. And Mr. Buchanan, we have an intimate audience this evening. If you'd like to say something, you know you're more than welcome. Oh, but because we want the audience and the television to hear. Okay.
As Dr. Wood was saying, so many times what's said about Southfield Public Schools, it has more to do with the things that are inflammatory. I mean, we looked at the situation with, yes, we had a fight between two 15-year-old girls, and it was just blasted all over the news. Like all of a sudden, we're just out of control in Southfield. When the fact of the matter is that was one incident, 67 seconds the whole thing took, and I think the reporting on that took like 7 minutes. When they found out the true story behind it though, the retraction took like 30 seconds, and I don't think anybody really got a chance to see what that was. I think we all missed that. And likewise, these MEAP tests and things of that nature are just other things that are used to, you know, beat public schools over the head with, oh, they're not getting the job done. But then when you look at, you know, the numbers as they truly are, you see a totally different, you know, picture, a different explanation, the real story as to what's taking place here in Southfield Public Schools. So as a tribute to our teaching staff, my colleagues on the board, and how hard we all work to make sure that this district continues to set the bar and set it very high for the achievement of all of our students here in Southfield. So I just want to leave you with that. That is what's really taking place. This is the real explanation of what takes place in Southfield Public Schools. And I thank you for coming out to hear an explanation of how things really are taking place here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan.
Yeah, we're not finished. Right. But do you know that the more students you test, the more spread out, the more variance you have in your scores. So the more students you test, so we test 96% African American, other districts are testing only 12.2. And what happens in some other districts, I have to say it this way because it is political, but some of our better students are leaving for the wrong reason. And if they stay at home, then our scores will be even higher.
And I'm going to address your question, but you said something that I have to reiterate. The longer you stay here in Southfield, the better your children will perform, and the more time we have with them to support them and to make them the very best that they can be. Okay.
The question that I have 3 children, and 2 of the children went to Vandenberg Elementary School, and they have high scores on their MEAP. And my last son, he's 9 years old, in the 4th grade, and his MEAP scores were terrible, horrible. So I wanted to pull him out of the school. I even had a talk with the teacher to see if they could give them their books to bring home. Because the other 2 children, they have high IQ. I can understand that with the last child. And I've been working with him, tutoring him, but his MEAP scores were terrible, really bad. And I was discouraged. That's why I came to this meeting today.
Well, we don't want you to be discouraged, we want you to be encouraged. Mr. Dixon, do you want to share anything about the 4th grades? Because that was another question about 4th grade. What we do know is that there are so many different factors that play into the MEAP assessment. And years ago, I used to be one of those teachers and educators that would go to the state and we would look at all the different items and we would review the items. But it's not a perfect test. And every year, there's a different selection of items that are placed on the test. And some years, the items may be a little bit more difficult than others. We really have to study, not only in our district, but across the state, because 4th grade, there were more, it was a challenging year for many of the students who were in the 4th grade.
They had a whole week. The teacher had a whole week and tutored them.
Okay. Okay. Well, you know what? After this meeting, let's talk, and I'll get your number, and then we can sit and have some conversation. I'd love to do that, and bring Miss John into the conversation also. In closing, I also would like to acknowledge that she wanted to be here so bad, but our superintendent, Dr. Cook Robinson, is working right now. She is in the process of reviewing and accrediting another district, and so she wishes to share her very best for all of the parents present, and that she will see you again in the future. The other thing in closing I wanted to just acknowledge and let you know you're more than welcome to have. On the table here we have MEAP parent booklets for every grade level, and you're welcome to take them. Take them for the grade your child is in right now, and then take it for the grade your child will be in next year. We have plenty of copies. And I also will end by saying, please feel free to call myself, Linda Wood, and I'm the Associate Superintendent for Instruction. I also want to introduce Mrs. Alma Dean, who is our Academic Achievement Supervisor, who is also gracious and willing to help and support and guide you in the right direction. New to our staff is Polly Szynski. She is our data coach, and she is heavy into this MEAP and testing, and I'm grateful for her. And while I'm introducing, I have Robin Brown, who's not affiliated so much with MEAP and providing that, but she is really a big hand with CTE and our Saturday school. We look forward to having your children join us on Saturday. And if you didn't know about Saturday, please stop over and talk to Robin before you leave, because it's a wonderful opportunity for our kids to have a little bit more support and reinforcement on Saturday. And again, Mr. Earl Dixon, our assessment consultant, who has done a tremendous job. I thank each of you for being here. Stay around, and I'm willing to stay here until you're ready to leave. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you so much.